Hello and welcome to Keeping Plans on Track. Planning in business seems to be an Achilles heel for moving a business forward. And previously I've done videos about how we do the mechanism of actually planning and the detail of how we break tasks down into goals and the achieving those goals through separate tasks. What I'm doing today is looking more top down. So what I'm going to look at is how the company organization supports and works around the planning system. So we're going to start by looking at where do we actually get with planning? What I thought was a good place to start is, why is there a problem? And doing a quick trawl of things for a minute or two from my head, I came up with the following things, which might ring some bells with you. Oh, we were too busy, too far ahead to worry about starting yet. I can catch up later. Other priorities take precedence in this situation. What else we got? Somebody else is covering it. Or I can start late and catch up. And how about more important things to do? Well, we often, seldom, never complete a plan. So why would this be any different? And then the final one on this is actually management team is overstretched and they're not managing the plan. They're leaving people to get on with it. And if they're not held accountable, everything starts to slip. So this to me is often a reflection of these things not happening. So think about your own process. Do you see these sort of comments popping up? And actually, does your planning progress meeting turn into more of a discussion about, we haven't managed to get M3 screws, whereas actually not of what you're doing to correct any problems that needs addressing and getting back on track? So in other words, people are more coming up with excuses and reasons why they're behind schedule, rather than what they can do to correct it and get everything back where you want it to be. If we look at these fundamentally, I thought we can summarize these fairly simply. And the way I put it is this: do we have clarity on what we're trying to achieve? And to a large extent, this to me is going to come down to the goals being very specific and clearly smart tested. Do we have accountability? Do we have one person who's responsible for achieving the goal which has been set? And actually the underlying one is actually an understanding. Does everybody involved in that plan understand the repercussions of what they've been asked to do to other departments within the company? There's always this tendency in a company that people get blinkered and, well, this is my responsibility here and I'm concentrating on this. And why do you want me to fill in this form? It doesn't help me in the slightest. The fact that could be totally messing up something else in another division of the company doesn't get understood and sort of gets dismissed. So an understanding of the overall goal of the company and how that interacts and what you've been asked to do, why you've been asked to do it. If you don't explain why they've been asked to do it, then there's every risk that they will find another thing which is more important to them to get done. So let's start to break this down a little bit. What should we look at? And a great starting point to me is a 5-year vision and plan. Now, the reason for this is looking far enough ahead. And for most SMEs, with not excessively long lead times, if we were designing new aircraft or maybe even a new car, 5 years wouldn't be enough, because they will be thinking in advance of that when they start doing the designs and everything else. So to be looking at your 5-year plan, very often, if you've got a turnover you need to achieve, you will be needing to do something in this current year, maybe even this current quarter, to achieve something on your 5-year plan. So I'm picking a 5-year plan. If you're in a specific sector which has very long or very short lead times, it may vary, but we'll take that as the focus. From the 5-year plan, you create your 3-year plan, your 12-month plan, and your 90-day plans. So they're the ones we're picking up from. And actually the question in here, how much clarity does your 5-year plan bring to your 90-day plan? Are you tying the two together, or is it kind of an arbitrary relationship that you review it once a year and say, yeah, well, this is kind of where we want to go? So this is the focus I'm going to put here to try and tie it together. And here's a way that we can do that. If we look at your 5-year plan and we break it down to various things in the company. So we've got down here some suggestions. We've got culture, we've got growth, revenue, stroke profit, cash, debt, company ownership. Is that going to change in 5 years? Management structure, industries you operate in, target market, geography, locations, services, product offered, target market in there, USP, all these things and others. What is it you could break down your 5-year plan into something quite structured like this, which is effectively a goal list? This can become your guide, because as soon as you start working on the things you're going to change, you could then say, well, that's going to be in the 12-month goals. That's going to be in the 3-year goals. Actually, what's going to be drawn in? What do we need to work on in the next 90-day period to achieve that? So that's the starting point. Now, you can elaborate on that and look into the detail as to what those particular parameters would be for your particular company. So now let's look at accountability. And the accountability ends with a person at the top. But actually what I'm going to say to you is your key team, your whole of this is your top level management team. This is really where it all starts. This is where we need to tie everything together, because the people sat at the top of these departments are in your management team, and they're the ones which need to set the precedent for their own teams. So effectively, a level below that, the commercial manager is obviously responsible for sales, marketing, account management in this case. This person is going to set and guide the plans and the goals for the people in these separate departments. So we build a structure. We're not going to look at this bit. This is the bit which would be taken more into your 90-day planning and the detail. We're going to look at how the process works with this senior team. So if we look at these departments, we can look at it in a slightly different way and say, what's the purpose of the department? Now, we've put commercial, operations, finance, HR, and admin. You may not like to refine that differently for your company, but these simple basic ones will be within most company setup. So what could we say the purposes are, the purpose of each department? Commercial. Fundamentally, the purpose of the commercial department is to win business. The purpose of operations is to do the business, make the product, to produce the service. Finance, collect the money. HR, the glue, sorry, HR and admin, the glue which ties everything together, the bit which joins everything together. If your team's not happy, then they're not going to do the work. HR, admin, the key to sorting that out. So this is where we start to be very clear on where we're going to assert this. So how can we take it to the next level? When we talk about taking on an employee, we talk about a positional contract and the detail of how we break the job specification down. This same thing can apply to the department. So what you can look at is areas of responsibility, typically 3 to 5 areas, what they're going to deliver within each area. Again, stick 3 to 5 things they're going to deliver. And finally, the KPIs to monitor that delivery. And you can do that for each of your departments. Now we're starting to build up a structure from the top down, working through the system. Where do we go next? Very often, there are things I call red flags. People say things and you think, hang on a minute, what does that actually mean? And so within planning, if we're in a planning situation and we're starting to define who's doing what, unacceptable answers to me would be, so something like who's responsible for a product is, we all are. Somebody not in the room. That's a good question. Otherwise, I don't know. Can you repeat the question? Another way of writing it. Operations, plan statement. Who in operations? Anna and James. 2 people, not 1. Not good. Peter, I think. These would all be areas which aren't specific enough to ensure somebody is taking responsibility to be accountable to sort it out. What we're looking for as an acceptable answer is something like this. The name of a person who is in the room, so we can actually talk to them about it, who has ownership of the area that we've actually raised the question about. That is being very specific. And that within a plan is what we're aiming to achieve. Now, with regard to being in the room, when we're talking about setting the goals with the senior management team, the buck stops with the senior management team. But when we're talking about the actual 90-day planning, we're talking about the senior manager who's then managing these departments. So now we move down to the next level. And there is a key point here. Have we got the right people in the right seats? The thing with a business is it evolves as it grows, as it develops. And actually, the best people you can have in a company will outgrow the company. Their personal development will be faster than the development of the business. And what that usually means is, unless you can move them to more senior positions within the business, they will leave and go and work somewhere else. But there will be a net gain to the company as you go through that, because the company will grow using their expertise. But conversely, there will be key people who get outgrown by the business. Now, what that means, it means they're not developing themselves, they're stagnant. And the company outgrows the person. As the responsibilities grow of the person that we're talking about, invariably what happens is we're adding people underneath them because we tend to push the senior people up in a business. And the risk is we can push them beyond their capability. And this very quickly becomes apparent. So the question is, have we got the right people in the right seats doing the right jobs? And it's something you need to be aware of, that sometimes the person is not right for that position and they don't want to move up as a company grows. They want to stay in their same position. And there's no point in pushing them to take a more senior position if they're not prepared to invest in themselves and develop themselves. So let's look at the way that the things which would flag to you as to how well people are engaging. And this is a nice little chart that we have here to describe the way that people engage. And at the left-hand end here, we have passive engagement. So people play the role. They look like they're actively listening. They give you all the right feedback, but they're very internally focused. They contribute when asked, but actually aren't getting greatly involved any more than they have to. So when we move across to active engagement, they're actively getting involved with what's going on. They're contributing in advance to situations and debates. So as they're bringing positiveness to the table, they energize the meeting. These are the people who are going somewhere in the business. And ultimately, leadership, the top people, they've got to lead the discussion. They've got to be understanding in advance of the options, because they're the people who are going to bring the questions to the table. And they take responsibility for the outcomes. So we want people here who are moving to here, and these people are going to do the more mediocre jobs. They're not going to be progressing in a management career. What you need to be clear of is that sometimes people get swept up as a passive person into a management role, and that can outgrow them. And then you're looking at people who are not controlling what's going on in the department. So what's next? Let's have a look at the way teams interact. And a bit along the lines of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we need at the core here is trust. So when we're in these management meetings and you're asking about detail, we need to have trust that we're not going to be pilloried in the future by our own managers for something that we've said and brought to the table. So we can operate with trust. We've got no fear of conflicts because it's a discussion rather than a personal vendetta between people. Once we've got this comfort factor in place, we can offer more commitment. In this case, we're saying 100% commitment. We can be comfortable with accountability because we know that we're going to do our best and the company's not going to come back and blame us if it doesn't work. We're going to have a reasonable discussion. And the end result is we're focusing on the actual output, the result. That's where we're focusing the senior management team working in this way. If we come back to this old adage, performance equals potential minus interference. So what we can look at here is we want to optimize performance. And that performance is made up of the potential, which is really the knowledge base of the person or people involved, minus interference, what they get distracted by. Now, interference can be of their making, or it can be somebody else's making. The danger is it quite possibly, even if it is of their own making, isn't done consciously. If there's something they're not comfortable in doing, or there's something they're not sure about, they could very easily find something else which they consider more important to do. So they can create their own interference, coming back to this passive manager position. So think about the way that your team is actually giving you performance, because actually, what potential have they got? Are they personally developing themselves? And what is getting in the way to stop them getting the results you want? And what we come back to here is our requirement: clarity, accountability, and understanding. So the clarity is about being very clear on the goals that we set. The accountability is about setting one key person to be responsible for delivery, but cross-pollination then to give an understanding across the different departments as to why things are important. It's not just your department that counts. Everybody has to interact to get the results for the business. So where do we go from here? What's a possible solution? What I propose to you is that you can hold a quarterly senior management meeting. This is not a quick meeting. It's going to be at least half a day, quite possibly a full day session. And you clarify the driver's goals and reasons for why you're doing things. And more specifically, you allocate who's going to be responsible. This isn't the 90-day plan. This is actually looking at the goals. What we're looking to achieve is that everybody knows what everybody else is doing and why. It's an opportunity to realign everyone to the company plan. But as I say, this isn't the 90-day planning session. This is where we define the goals and we overcome any blockers, particularly between departments, that we need to resolve before we get the rest of the team involved. And then finally, where do we go to actually have this meeting? The first thing is we need to have preparation. And the reason we have preparation is we want to make sure that the team have done their homework and they're engaged. They're actively preparing for this very important session. And where we start with this is actively producing in writing answers to the following. What do they want out of the day? The outcomes. Good news. We want to use this as a celebration. We want to keep it upbeat. Things that have gone really well in the last 90 days. Things that are working, systems, etc., well within the business. Things that are not working that we need to address and talk about. and goals that we're looking to achieve next. What's the next process from a discussion between departments? There will then be two specific areas which need specific reporting: the financial review from your financial director, and the CEO produce reports on goals and KPIs and how they're progressing. So this is all done in advance. It's in writing. We'll go back to the CEO so he knows that everybody's prepared for the meeting. It's not acceptable. There's not somebody sat in the chair for every department to be able to answer all the questions they're going to be required. Sorry, and vision and values on the CEO as well. Finally, a suggested agenda to get started. And we would then be looking at, first of all, the introduction to the high performance management team principle, issues that we're going to review good news, working, not working. So we then start to go through those areas. We'll review the financial performance and the 90-day goals, where we're actually going with those. Review any vision and value infringements, anything else we need to consolidate on there, particularly working between departments and supporting one another. Organisation chart for accountability. Are we changing anything? Where's the responsibilities going? Goals for the next 12 months and goals for the 90-day plan. No detail. That's what they do on a departmental basis. So this would be an outline for where to move your business forward by pulling the whole of the top of the company together, and then they can percolate it down to their team. So I wish you best of luck with this. I hope it's helpful to you, and I look forward to hearing about your results in the future. All the best in your business.